UFC 314 wasn't about shock. It wasn't the night of chaos, surprise KOs, or underdog miracles. It was something rarer. Clarity.
All the doubts in his mind, and what he said in the octagon was a beautiful thing.
It was.
That adversity
It's a privilege. You hear people talk about that all the time. It truly is. This moment is incredible.
We get so lost in pre-fight hype, the narratives, the short memory syndrome. Our judgment takes a hit. But last Saturday, no matter how you felt about the results, there was this quiet moment where you probably thought, yeah, I knew this could happen. In the main event, Alexander Volkanovski did what he always does: silence the question, bury the next contender, and remind everyone that we're witnessing something we might never see again. He didn't just defend his belt, he defined greatness.
Going to count you out, is he done? Obviously I took some shots as well, so I guess I'm glad I got to feel that and bounce back from a bit of adversity.
But beneath the shine of Volk's dominance, another fighter was quietly proving a point. A fighter who spent most of his UFC run being laughed at, doubted, and labeled as nothing but hype. But this time, something changed. Paddy gave us a performance that shut people up, and more importantly, converted them. The critics didn't just lose their voice.
Hopefully, Pimblett just learns head movement and keeping his chin tucked just a little bit.
A lot of them switched sides, and for the first time, it felt like Paddy wasn't trying to prove something. He just went out there and showed us who he really was.
I've proved my point, told everyone I was going to do what I've just done, and what happened, you know what I mean?
And then there was Bryce Mitchell, a man who's made headlines for everything but fighting lately. The UFC didn't fine him, didn't suspend him. They did something much clearer. They fed him to Jean Silva, a walking consequence. And Jean didn't just beat him, he finished what Dana White started. This is what the deep end is all about. Not just result, not just highlights, but what it all means. Where career shift, narrative change, and future begin to unravel. If you're here, you're not just watching fights, you're watching what happens after. So, let's go deeper. This is the deep end.
Thank you to the fighting business. Absolutely amazing.
One of my favorite new channels going right now.
In the most anticipated featured fight, the people's main event for some, Bryce Mitchell faced Jean Silva. This one had the best build-up by far, and it was a roller coaster. All began with Silva calling out Bryce for a fight, and the crowd was completely on his side.
Fuck Bryce Mitchell! Hey, brother! Fuck Bryce Mitchell!
Bryce was the villain and was booed out of the arena in the first press conference, but there was a shift in reception as we got closer to the event. Maybe it was because Bryce doubled down and faced the media, but he definitely got somewhat of a pop in the next press conference.
I put a lot of dogs down in my day. All those dogs that like to come up to the farm, they kill my animals. You know what they all got in common? They squeal right before they die.
Some fans had started cheering for him, and there was a perfect underdog story going on. He was put in this fight by his own boss to be slaughtered, but he was empowered by God and the prayers of his fans, and the man looked focused on defying the odds and slaying Goliath. Unfortunately though, Jean Silva was as advertised, and the odds were accurate as he looked to be a step or even 2 steps ahead of Bryce. And I truly believe he could have finished him on the feet, but he decided to go for a submission and choke out the grappler with a vicious ninja choke.
I'm just going to keep fighting. And that's all I can do. So that's all we can all do. Anytime you take a loss, just learn from it and keep fighting. That's what I'm going to do. So I really want to tell y'all, A, I'm healthy. B, I love y'all. And I thank y'all. So y'all take care.
Well, that puts an end to Bryce becoming anything more than a semi-popular and entertaining featherweight. Jean Silva though, this man, as I said, was as advertised. So, say hello to the newest contender at 145.
I just wanted to thank everyone and thank people for things, and the only way I could find to thank people was to cry.
Speaking of new contenders, say hello to Paddy Pimblett as well. For years, many, including myself, didn't give Paddy much of a chance at breaking into the top 5 in the most elite division in the sport, never mind becoming champion. I think his fighting style is horrible. I think he telegraphs a lot of his shots. I think he leaves his chin up in the air. He struggled to beat Jared Gordon, and according to most, he lost that fight. Most wrote him off after the Gordon fight, but I think we made a mistake when we assumed that Paddy wouldn't keep improving, and he he didn't just improve, he evolved. Michael Chandler, even if he's 38 years old and has more foul highlights than KOs in the UFC, he's still a very dangerous test for emerging contenders. In every loss before this, Chandler always had a moment.
He had Poirier in trouble after a headbutt, but he nearly finished him. He also had Charles in trouble after an eye poke, just to be clear, but still, Chandler always found a way to latch onto something. But out of all the lightweights, it was Paddy who utterly decimated him.
From the opening bell, Paddy didn't allow Chandler a single moment of success on the ground. Despite taking Paddy down, Chandler was lost. But even more surprisingly, Paddy was doing better on the feet. The low kicks, the punches, the combos, every hit was frustrating Chandler. And when it was clear that Paddy wasn't slowing down, Chandler was fucked. The knee to the face carved Chandler's cheek open, and from there, Paddy showed no mercy and just beat the hell out of him on the ground until the referee stepped in. I swear to God, I never thought I'd say this, but Paddy Pimblett is actually knocking on the door of the top 5 in the most competitive division in the sport, right alongside the likes of Poirier, Gaethje, and Charles, and with Islam not too far away either.
Next year, I might actually make a deeper dive, with the main event being Paddy challenging for the title.
Me and Brett, I always said this was in my future. People laughed at me when I first said it and said I weren't going to do it. I can remember getting laughed at and said I'll never be ranked, going to be ranked 7 on Monday. And then I'm coming for the top 5 and then the title.
In the main event of UFC 314, the vacant featherweight title was on the line. Before the whole MMA crazy copyright tantrum that wiped out my portfolio, Alexander Volkanovski was one of the more prominent fighters in my library, and every video I made about him was me preaching to you about how great he was. When he beat Holloway for the 3rd time, I cooked up a before and after, and I remember calling him the closest thing to perfection we've seen inside the octagon. When he came this close to beating Islam, the lightweight champion, I said he may have lost the match, but he didn't lose the fight. Finally, when he demolished Yair Rodriguez, I declared him the greatest featherweight in UFC history. Good times. Great times, really. But then it all came crashing down. I don't need to go over it again, but the once great Alexander Volkanovski lost it all in his next 2 fights. When Islam knocked him out in the rematch, Volk lost his chance to become double champion. But more importantly, that aura of invincibility, of greatness, took a bad hit. But that was on short notice in a division above, so when he came back down to defend his featherweight title against Poirier, maybe he would be okay. But in 2 fights, Alexander Volkanovski had gone from the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, the featherweight GOAT, and a rival to Islam, to the #1 ranked featherweight in the world. Believe it or not, that's a bad fall for someone so close to immortalized greatness.
Poirier vacated the title and moved up to 155, but with Diego Lopez replacing Poirier, the danger remained.
Lopez, while maybe not as refined or as lethal as Poirier, was lethal enough to put anyone at featherweight down, and he was younger, stronger, and hungry for gold. Despite all this man had done, despite all the title wins, the master classes, the records, the glory, Alexander Volkanovski still had to prove himself yet again, but he was a 36-year-old featherweight who had suffered back-to-back KO loss, and Drake had bet on him. Time, history, and even fate itself was against this man. But if he could pull this off, if for one night Alexander Volkanovski could be great again, I said it before, if anyone can turn back time, it would be him. The Volk we saw in the main event of UFC 314 was definitely not in his prime. This wasn't the same guy who schooled Holloway and challenged Islam. He was older, slower, less durable, less great. But it didn't matter, because on that night, Alexander Volkanovski was on a mission to reclaim greatness. For the first 4 rounds, Volk fought Diego head-on, and what we all feared nearly ended up happening, and twice. But both times, the former featherweight champion picked himself back up and went right back into war. He was out of his prime, physically weaker, athletically slower, and less agile, but when the referee raised his hand, Dana White wrapped a belt around him, and Bruce Buffer declared him once again the undisputed featherweight champion. We found out that he was still great.
Hey, adversity is a privilege. You hear people talk about that all the time. It truly is. This moment is incredible. But hey, I love you all. I really appreciate you.
Alexander Volkanovski didn't just win a fight that night. He won back his story. In a sport that moves fast, forgets faster, and where legends are only as good as their last performance, Volk reminded the world that greatness isn't solely about being unbeatable. It's about rising after you've been broken.
He wasn't the same. He wasn't perfect, but he was still him. for one more night, and the featherweight throne had a familiar name etched back onto it.
You defied the Drake curse. He put 500 grand on you. You defied the over 35 curse. Does this make the win even more sweeter?
I mean, yeah, we broke a few records here, I think. Even coming off 2 knockout losses. No one's ever done that, won a title after that. I mean, they'll find new ones, and then I'll just beat them as well.
Bryce tried. He stood tall in the face of doubt, walked into the fire, and gave it everything he had. But sometimes, heart isn't enough. Not when you're up against a future contender like Jean Silva. Paddy succeeded. He silenced the critics, evolved in real time, and left no doubt that he belongs with the best. A meme-turned contender, right before our eyes. And Volk transcended. He rose from the ashes of defeat, stared down the end of his legacy, and refused to let the story end there.
When I'm talking about the adversity being a privilege, all the odds are stacked against me. I can go and do something incredible, do something that no one's done. Over 35-year-old, no one's done that in our divisions. No one's done that from the welterweight down or something like that. And I'm 36 years old, coming off 2 knockout victories. No one's done that. You know, trying to at least rise to the occasion through adversity is only going to make you stronger. So that's the message.
These are the stories that don't show up on stat sheets or highlight reels, but they matter just as much.
That is what the deep end is for. But if you want to go deeper, see the deleted videos, the interviews, the music playlists, the thumbnails, the YouTube SEO breakdowns, the TFB Patreon is where all of that lives. I'm Milan, this is The Fighting Business, and I'll see you in the next one.